Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today, doing another NBA debate. This one's going to be a little more free flowing. Got my guy Gavin here from NBA Real Talk. How you doing, man?
I'm great, man. Happy to be here. Happy to talk as always.
Yeah, it's been a minute. We did a couple debates in the past. We're bringing it back. This one, like I said, it's going to be a more free flowing discussion about just NBA free agency as a whole. Because the last couple years, I think 2019 was the last huge one, that kind of caught our eyes. And, whether it be stuff with trades, like trade requests or the CBA, whatever it may be, like it's kind of, I feel like changed free agency a little bit. So I'll give you the floor first. Tell me, do you think, NBA free agency is dead? And is there like a particular reason as to why that may be?
I mean, obviously, I don't think anytime soon. Maybe under the new CBA to an extent, but to say it's dead. But I think people care less. It has less meaning. I can't remember if it was last season or the season after the bubble where it was like the most amount of signings or something that had happened like in NBA history, and like $1 billion or whatever was getting handed out like on one particular day. But I think the overarching narrative of my thoughts on this are going to be like NBA drama for trades and stuff has kind of peaked. And even though it's still worth talking about and being in the news, nobody really cares anymore. And slightly unique perspective here, being in Canada as a Raptors fan, we never could get very excited about free agency because nobody really wanted to sign in free agency. I mean, we get like, I think the last guy we got was like Otto Porter Jr. and guys like that, sort of these tertiary guys. But I mean, basically, like we had Hito Turkoglu many years ago, but basically we only ever trade for guys, you know what I mean, or draft them. So I can honestly say, free agency's never been excited as a Toronto Raptors fan. The most excitement we ever got was Kawhi Leonard and the rumors about Giannis wanting to sign with us. I can honestly highlight those as I think Steve Nash was rumored at one point in our iconic history. So free agency's never been that big of a deal to us, but even from a league perspective, I would say in the I guess we call those the 2010s, between 2010 and 2020. The 2010s, I think, was the peak, and I think we're just done with it, man. I think nobody cares because what does it mean when you get signed in free agency? It doesn't mean anything anymore. Then it might just be your stop for a cup of coffee before you go somewhere else next year, right? So honestly, I think it's to describe it as dead. I don't know if I describe it as dead, but I describe it as, the next, the almost there, the next best thing.
Yeah, and I think too, like, I mean, you even mentioned like from a Raptors fan perspective, like the Kawhi thing was probably the biggest thing, and even that like was kind of a trade request, and I feel like trade requests have kind of played a big part in why free agency from a signings perspective is not as big as it once was. I mean, like, look at Harden, like he accepted the player option, now he wants out of Philly, or like Dame, he got his extension last year, now he wants out. And then like Kevin Durant last summer did the same thing, and then Kyrie accepted his player option, and trade deadline did the same thing. And I think Harden even did it before he came to Brooklyn. So like it's been just a lot of things like over the last couple years, I think ever since like that 2019 summer, where it's like the players have had more say like with where they want to go via trades. Like, I want out, I want to go here. And more times than not, they end up getting to go where they want. So like I feel like that's something that I think we have to consider, where it's like, is this bad for the NBA moving forward? And I guess I'll let you go on that, but I guess like for me personally, like, and you can kind of tell me what you think about it. I feel like in a way it's yes or no. I think yes, because it defeats the purpose of like the offseason signings from a management perspective, at least for the big fish. Now, like maybe, because let's use the Kawhi example again, like in 2019, like, oh, well, that might have, decided Kawhi, but also like that decided where Danny Green was going to sign, and that was the Lakers, because if Kawhi stayed with Toronto, Danny Green was going to stay, right? So
when he hit agency, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So like from that perspective, yeah, and I would say it does for that regard, but also like I think maybe it doesn't hurt the NBA for like the lower small market teams that might not have a chance in free agency anyways, and maybe to go after those players. So like, what do you think? from that sense, like if it's maybe is good for the NBA because it gives like smaller market teams a better chance, like if they can make a trade or something like that?
I think what's been happening the last few years in the NBA, personally, I think is, it depends what you mean by bad for the NBA. Bad for ratings, I would say it can go either way, but generally it'll probably stay around the same. But for like the other players in the league, I do think it's sort of bad, for them. I could never have envisioned the day, I don't know if you were the same when you were a kid, but when you're a kid and like your favorite player wants to go somewhere else and you don't really know how like business or being an adult works, you're like, oh, he's a trader. Like, what a bad guy. Oh, he wants more money, greedy or whatever. And then, after the LeBron stage or whatever, where even though he got villainized, I think it opened up people's perception more to the idea of, hey, these guys kind of deserve to go where they want to go, not just because that's in the contract, because, it's not like someone's not going to trade them or use them or whatever at a moment's notice. I have a saying I always say to my friends, I say, don't kill yourself for a job that would just replace you tomorrow if you died anyway. And I think players had, even though they're millionaires, had good reason to act that way. But now, like you said, with the trade requests and stuff, I don't think it's good for the game. As a matter of fact, I think it's the type of drama that the NBA, rightfully so, is sort of trying to. You never know with the NBA because, like we know, controversy sells. But as I mentioned, I think in my opening statement there, we've peaked a little bit. It's not that entertaining anymore. Like every other day. And here's the other thing: it's not very simplistic either. It's like first they request a trade, then they retract it, then they only want to go here, and then they opt into their contract and they want to trade because they had a back. It's one of those things where the whole situation is getting so convoluted. You're like, I guess for lack of better words, just the trust of everything is broken. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think NBA free agency got opened up by I think it really started with the Celtics forming with Garnett and Ray Allen, even though I don't think that was all free agency, but that was when the idea kind of started of like three guys getting together sort of at the mid end of their career and like really going for it. And then LeBron and Bosh and Wade joining in their prime. It's like, okay, here's the real deal. And it is free agency. All these guys made this decision, which affected all their teams as they left and stuff like that. And then you had everything going on, with players floating around through the mid 2010s, and then like the Paul George, Kawhi Leonard thing, right? Like that's where that kind of started, where it was like, oh, Paul George didn't just signed, and you just told him, yeah, just request a trade, and I'm only going here, because a lot of people don't remember. Kawhi said he would have stayed with the Raptors if he wanted to play with Paul George. That was his priority, and he for sure wanted to be in LA too. But his priority was so like, you got Kawhi, who's so good. But he's so good, he can literally be like, I want this player who just signed a contract. You're going to find a way to get him. You will trade for him. And if you trade for him, I will play for you. That's a little convoluted right there. But at least that's kind of like an interesting, like little like villainous plot to like take over the NBA, and the rest of the NBA is waiting to see where secretive Kawhi is going to sign or something. Like that's when it's like, it's fun. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now, a guy like Damian Lillard, the one guy we were like, he's never going to request a trade or something like that. He finally requests one, and to be honest, it's kind of like boring. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, Dame finally, like, and when it took until Portland literally drafting someone who could play his position, it's like, okay, well, I guess I might as well. It's like he wouldn't even request a trade till it was like, well, there's nothing left to do, and we're just so used to guys doing it. I don't even remember was it Harden who requested first or Lillard who requested one first, and I don't know, somebody else has requested a trade and stuff like that. It's just become so the norm that I think it's dishonoring the game a little bit.
Yeah, and I think too, like when you were talking about at least the Kawhi scenario, like most of free agency has been like that, because I remember like in past years, it's like there might be big free agents signed like 2 weeks after, sometimes even like at the end of July or something like that. And then like even that Kawhi one, like that drug out really wasn't even like that long. I think it was only like 6 or 7 days, but people were treating it like, man, like I can't, like, and it had people on the edge of their seat because they're like, is he going to Toronto? Is he going to the Lakers? Because Lakers fans were all on that. And then it's like, or is he going to maybe sign with the Clippers or something like that? And I think everyone was like, they weren't sure because like Kawhi is this low key dude, especially. But I feel like lately, like
one team they said he's definitely like. Remember, I think it's
yeah.
Cardinals guys were like the only one we know he's not signing with is the Clippers.
I will say, fun fact, I was one of the lone people that predicted he would go to the Clippers in real time. Yes, I was.
I didn't see it coming either.
Yeah, it was. I just had a feeling it made the most sense. But in terms
we
of
didn't see the whole Paul George factor.
yeah,
too,
I did not see Paul George coming, no. But I had a feeling Kawhi would. But I think in past years, especially this year, like every notable name, or I guess like everything that's eye-popping was signed in the first day, especially because they moved the deadline up to like 6 p.m. or something like that. Like, so it's like just in that night, it's like, all right, this is just free agency date now. And then like every day after that doesn't matter as much, essentially. And like there might be a few people signed here and there, but like no one really cares as much. They're like, okay, and like there's still even good players out there. Like at the time we're making this, like Kelly Oubre is still out there, Christian Wood is still out there, but like even if they sign now, I feel like people are like, it's like they've already gone like 50 days without being signed. And it's almost like, what's their role going to be on a team if they do get signed? It's like they're probably not going to be used for much other than like maybe like one or two like specialty parts of their game. So I don't know if it's like that as well. Like it maybe takes away some of the fun from it. And then also like, I guess just a little bit with the CBA again. Like I think like they've been trimming down on like the teams that are paying a lot, like the Clippers or the Warriors or stuff like that. And, also teams are like making questionable moves just to absorb their money. I mean, like this summer, Bruce Brown signed for $45 million for 2 years. And he played great in the championship run, but I think a lot of people thought that might've been too much, but it's like
Houston.
Yep, Fred VanVleet as well. Jeremy Grant, the Jazz even trading for John Collins. Like, so it's like a lot of people made moves just in spite of that. So it's like the free agency moves that were supposed to be eye-popping, it's like they almost feel like not as great, like the Fred VanVleets or the Bruce Brown or like stuff like that. Because like that's just so much money for a player that probably shouldn't get that much money. I think I was hearing on the radio the other day too, like Josh Hart, a 4-year, $81 million deal. And don't get me wrong, he's important for the Knicks, but to think a guy like that getting $20 million a year, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, that's where I don't know if I'm saying I disagree, but to me, like that's the stuff that's kind of interesting, especially just when I say interesting, probably more to guys like you and me. Like I'm not like one of these like cap nerds, like a sporting logically kind of guy, but like obviously we understand how the game works, how the cap works. I'm like, so moves like VanVleet are interesting to me because it's just like, as a Raptors fan, I was one of the few who wanted to resign him. I said, we got to at least sign this guy and trade him. I was like, we can't let like another champion just walk off our team. And then, he gets signed to what actually isn't a horrible contract because it's really just 2 years, right? The team option on the third year. So it's like for a team that's just like up and coming and wants some guy to probably mentor and like run the offense and show the team how it's done. To me, those are the interesting signings, kind of like the scientifical kind of like, why are they overpaying for this guy? Why are they overpaying for that guy? I was going to say, like you were talking about with all the trade requests and that first, it's like, that's the thing is, as soon as free agency hour hits or whatever, you're like, oh, you just had to put the ink on the line. They're not even supposed to be talking yet. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so funny how the moment free agency starts, you're like, oh, tampering. But it's just like, whatever. And what really becomes the big deal in free agency is Giannis re-signed with the Bucks. You know what I mean? Like, or like, it wasn't really a big deal. It was kind of expected. It was like, yeah, Lillard stayed. Like, the storylines in free agency have basically become who's going to stay with their team. You know what I mean? And yeah. I'm not going to be like, oh, that's so terrible or toxic or anything like that. I'm just going to say, I think there's a peak amount of that the NBA can handle before it's just like, if all we care about are really the guys who stay for the most part, or the things we care about, the things that are most shocking are the guys who decide to stay. And there's only so many of those guys because if movement becomes the norm, then what is movement?
Yeah.
What makes trades interesting would be that they don't happen. We say trades happen all the time. Certain trades don't happen all the time, right? The NBA is interesting for that because the NBA, unlike like hockey and I don't know about football, but NBA, almost nobody ever gets a no trade clause. For some random reason, a Bradley Beal or somebody like that gets a no trade clause. But as far as the free agency and how it affects people's perception of the game, I think it's basically becoming, like you said, dead. And like you mentioned with the trades I think are contributing to that, because teams don't want it. Getting these guys on your team has become such a risk. Think of the risk already involved, free stuff like that. And going back to what I was kind of mentioning at the beginning, we've gotten to the point where, like, I'm not going to feel sorry for these billionaire owners, but there is a point of, like, you're supposed to do business the right way. And at the end of the day, they're the ones taking the risk. And these guys just don't seem to have any respect for the money they're signing for. So in that sense, I would say free agency is also making the game look bad, because it kind of is a bad reflection on the players nowadays. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, like, and I will say that, well, at least for like the signings that might be low key, like, because I know I was talking about the Josh Hart one. I feel like, at least for me, like, that does seem like a decent amount of money for a team that they're still going to probably be in playoff contention. I just don't know if, like, I see them as like a championship level team. You know what I mean? Like, maybe moves that could change a culture. Like, and that's why, like, even the Bruce Brown, signing, like, I like the signing. It's just like the money is, quite a bit. Or like maybe someone like Malik Beasley, who didn't get playing time on the Lakers, like him on the Bucks, like they might need some shooting. So like that might be interesting. So like, I guess from that perspective, like, it just seems like more of the players now that sign big money, like, we're on teams that I don't expect a lot from. Like the Rockets went crazy, and like Jeremy Grant in Portland, and stuff like that. So I guess that's my thing with that. But also, I mean, the 2019 free agency class was definitely an anomaly, because you're never going to see that many like huge names again probably go different places, like Kawhi to the Clippers, KD and Kyrie to the Nets, and Jimmy Butler to the Heat, and you know what I mean? Like, but I think maybe every free agency there should probably be at least one or two guys that do, you know what I mean? Like that do switch teams, and like maybe it makes it a little bit interesting. And it's not going to happen every year, but like just seems like ever since then, like you haven't really found that within, a free agency class. Most of these guys, they'll sign extensions before, like prior to the season or like midway through the season. So it defeats like the feeling of like free agency being like that, especially because like I think that was kind of the big thing, especially in the, like you said, the 2010s people would look at, because while the draft is entertaining, like I think, and at least for me, like, because I'll watch like especially the tournament and stuff like that, like there are people that don't, I guess, follow like college or like the overseas players as closely. So like the draft, they're like, okay, like I know the first couple guys, but like everyone after like the lottery, it's like, who cares? Like I don't know anything about them yet, and then like they have to wait and see. But I think free agency, it's like, oh, I know all these guys, like where are they going to go? Who's going to change each team? So that's why I feel like that's kind of like the biggest thing. And like, I don't know, it just hasn't been there the last couple years the same way that it was, whether it was 2019 or 2016 or 2010 or, you know what I mean? Even 2018.
I think another thing is because a lot of how we consume, because free agency, unlike most basketball content, is not within the actual game itself, right? So a lot of how we consume free agency is through the media. And let's be honest, like, how much can we listen to these guys just like talk about the rumors that we already know about of where somebody's going to go, while people in his camp tell me he really wants to go there, and it's like where he's from and all this kind of stuff. Like, in a lot of ways, at the end of the day, these situations aren't as unique that often. Sometimes they are. Kawhi's, I would say, was unique or something like that. But a lot of times it's just like there's nothing new. Like I always make this joke, like Adrian Wojnarowski is the master of coming out and like literally saying nothing new, nothing at all.
Yeah.
But taking up 5 minutes.
Unless it's draft night and he's just spoiling a draft pick.
Yeah, and to me, like the stuff like this, the media coverage of it kind of speaks to how dead it is, because this is their thing. This is probably one of their number one things that really like drives viewership, and all they can really talk about is the same old stuff. None of it really adds up to anything that unique or fresh or new, unless, like you said, every few years we get these amazing classes. Like I guess LeBron's year, there was Bosch. Did Wade sign that year too?
He was a free agent that year too, because him and LeBron were thinking about coming actually to the Bulls. So
yeah. And I can't remember if Carmelo was going down that line too, and then signed instead. And did he sign in Denver? I can't remember.
He was a free agent the next year because Denver traded him midway through the year. But Amari Stoudemire was a free agent that year. Carlos Boozer.
So, there's no denying whether we love or hate super teams. That kind of stuff was really interesting for a while. But now, like, everything about the way the game, I think the game has just changed so much. It's probably in a little bit of a phase of finding its new thing, because I think for a long time the NBA has been known as the League of Movement. But now if it's just known as the League of Movement, and that's just been normalized, there's not that much to get excited about. And like I said, I get more excited about who's going to stay. Like, again, to use Toronto as an example, and that sort of that little signing, big signing kind of thing, and the signs of the cap and stuff. I look at a guy like Pascal Siakam, where half our fans want to trade him, and I want to keep him because I'm like, yo, we live in Toronto. Like, you got to stop thinking like Toronto rebuild don't have a good history. We need to retool on the fly. So it's like, yes, I mean, whatever he's going to be eligible for, if he makes an All NBA team, I think he might be eligible for that $300 million or whatever Jaylen Brown style contract. But it's like, well, unless you have some idea where else we're going to get like 25 and 7 and 7 or whatever he puts up, you know what I mean? Like, we should overpay for this guy. And I think those types of signings have become the more interesting thing about free agency to me. So the most liveliest part of free agency are not from the biggest players, because I'm just used to them moving around.
Yeah, and even that example too, like, let's say they did trade Siakam, it's like more than likely the last couple of years, like whether it was him or Anunoby or whoever, like they found success of getting those guys like in the draft. Like, it wasn't free agency. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Hopefully, like, there's a change, like there's a year coming up where it's like we see a couple big fish move, and it's exciting again, like to the just a little bit similar to what we saw in like some of the past few years. But I don't know, man.
Do you prefer, I mean, obviously we have our favorite players, but do you prefer if guys move, or do you prefer like a Dame Lillard story, a Giannis Antetokounmpo type story? Do you prefer that, or do you prefer guys who move at a moment's notice?
I think I prefer like those guys to stay. It's just like the people that like there's up in the air, like they could be on a different team. Like, I think this summer, like there was guys like Kyrie and Draymond where it's like no one was really too sure, but like then they did re-sign and it like was like, all right, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Who cared, really? Yeah.
And even like maybe Middleton to an extent, because people were saying like he's finished, he's not gonna be the same player, and that like the Bucks had like a lot of guys they had to pay. So
yeah.
But I don't know, man. I think hopefully there is a better free agency class coming up. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's basically going to do it for us for this one. I don't know if you had any other final thoughts before we wrap this thing up.
You know what? Stay loyal as best you can. As long as you're treated well, treat them well. If they don't treat you well, you don't owe them nothing. But I just do think the NBA's missing I'll say a dash of loyalty, just a dash of it, because there's just too much. Like I said, I can't believe I'm saying this, but player empowerment, can it go too far? I'm simply going to say maybe it can, and maybe we've seen it. So, yeah.
If you're not going to be loyal, don't sign that extension, because we want to see these move.
I think we all know that after James Harden.
Yeah. But yeah, again, appreciate you joining me on this one. You guys can go check him out down below. But yeah, again, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and we're out. Peace.
Peace.